Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are strapping in and heading to the tarmac.
Chuckles. Yeah, this one is pretty intense.
It really is. And I want you to, just for a second, close your eyes and really picture the scene with us, because the setting here, it matters just as much as the science we're going to talk about.
It absolutely does.
So imagine the Negev desert. It's brutally hot. You've got that shimmering heat haze coming off the concrete, and there's just this deafening, overwhelming roar of jet engines in the background.
We are at a top secret training ground for the Israeli Air Force. And I mean, this is an environment where there is absolutely zero room for error.
None.
You have these young, incredibly talented, probably, let's be honest, very arrogant fighter pilots.
Oh, for sure.
And then you have the instructors.
Yeah.
These are the veterans whose entire job, their whole reason for being there, is to turn these cadets into, like, precision instruments of war.
Without getting them killed in the process.
Exactly. That's the tricky part.
It is high stakes, it is high pressure, and let's just say it's high testosterone. But the conflict we're looking at today, paradoxically, it didn't happen in the cockpit.
No, not at all. It happened in a classroom.
A quiet, air-conditioned briefing room where a visiting scientist, a psychologist, was giving a lecture on the psychology of effective training.
And this wasn't just any lecture. I mean, this scientist, he was presenting what was at the time the absolute gold standard of behavioral science.
He's basically explaining to these hardened military men that, based on decades of research,
And we're talking about research on pigeons, on rats, on humans, the whole shebang.
the science says that rewards are significantly more effective for teaching a skill than punishment is.
Right. It's that classic catch them doing something right philosophy. He's telling them, look, if you want a cadet to learn a complex maneuver, you praise him when he executes it well.
That positive reinforcement, it cements the learning. It makes the neural pathways stronger.
And punishment, the screaming, the berating, making them do push-ups on the tarmac, it just has all these negative side effects. It creates fear, it creates resentment.
And the science is clear. It's just not as effective for skill acquisition.
So you can imagine how well this be nice theory went over with a room full of combat pilots.
Like a lead balloon.
Pretty much. And this, right here, is the hook of our entire deep dive today. This is the moment that sparked this whole inquiry. One of the most senior flight instructors in the room, a guy with thousands of hours in the air, he raises his hand.
And he doesn't just have a question, does he?
No, he has a speech. He stands up and he basically tells the scientist, with all due respect, sir, your theory might work for rats in a maze, but it does not work for fighter pilots in the sky.
It's a devastating critique because it's not just an opinion. He says he has experience, he has data.
His own direct personal data. He says, and this is the core of it, I have praised cadets many times for performing a clean maneuver. Within seconds of that praise, the next time they try it, they usually do worse. Think about that for a second. He praises them.
And they immediately deteriorate. He sees it with his own eyes.
Right. And then he gives the other side of the coin.
He says, but on the flip side, when a cadet really messes up, when he flies a dangerous or sloppy maneuver and I scream into his earphone, I really chew him out.
The next time he tries it, he usually does better.
So his conclusion, from his perspective, is completely logical. It's inescapable. He says, don't tell me reward works and punishment doesn't. My experience proves that praise makes them soft and punishment wakes them up.
It's a total mic drop moment, isn't it? The academic theory, all the lab research says one thing. But this veteran's reality, what he sees every single day, says the exact opposite.
And he feels validated because every day, the universe seems to reinforce this belief. Scream, get improvement, praise, get deterioration. It's a perfect feedback loop.
And this is the mission of today's deep dive. We're going to unpack why that instructor was 100% right about what he saw.
He was a good observer.
An excellent observer. But he was completely, spectacularly wrong about why it was happening.
We are going to explore a statistical principle that explains why his punishment seemed to work when, in all likelihood, it was having no effect at all, or maybe even a negative one.
And it's a concept that governs, everything. Your investment portfolio, your golf game, your kid's report card, even who you choose to marry.
We are diving deep into regression to the mean.
It sounds so technical and, a bit boring.
It does. It sounds like something you'd just gloss over in a textbook. But as we go through our source for today, which is a seminal chapter on decision-making and statistics, you're going to see that this is actually a story about the perverse nature of reality.
That is the exact word the source uses. Perverse. because the feedback loop that life exposes us to is set up to trick us. It's designed to make us misunderstand the role of luck in success and failure.
So let's go back to that classroom. The scientist is standing there. He's momentarily stumped, because the instructor's observation is undeniable. He's not making it up.
But then he has this eureka moment, a flash of insight. He realizes the instructor has fallen into what we could call the causal trap.
The causal trap. I like that.
What is it? It's our brain's obsession with finding a reason for everything, a cause for every effect. The instructor sees screaming followed immediately by improvement.
So his brain just draws a straight line. The screaming caused the improvement. A leads to B.
It has to. That's how our minds work. We're storytellers.
Yeah.
But the scientists realized that the screaming was probably completely irrelevant.
The improvement was going to happen anyway.
The improvement was inevitable. It was baked into the math of the situation.
Okay, let's break this down because this is the absolute core of it. In any performance, and it doesn't matter if it's flying a jet, hitting a golf ball, or taking a test, there are always two components at play.
Right. You have skill and you have luck.
Skill is relatively stable, right? I mean, you don't become a terrible pilot overnight and you don't become a great one in 5 minutes.
Correct. Your underlying talent, your training, that's your baseline. It fluctuates a bit, but it's pretty steady day to day. But luck.
Luck is the opposite.
Luck is totally volatile. It fluctuates wildly. It's the gust of wind you didn't see, the glare from the sun, the random muscle twitch, the lucky bounce.
Okay, so with that framework skill plus luck, let's look at the first case. The cadet executes a maneuver perfectly. I mean, textbook perfect. Better than he's ever done it before. What does that tell us?
Well, it tells us he has skill, of
Yeah.
course. That's the baseline. But to be perfect, to be so far above his normal performance,
Be an outlier.
to be an outlier on the high side, he almost certainly had a massive helping of good luck on that specific attempt.
Everything just went right for him in that moment.
Everything broke his way. The wind, the sun, his nerves, the equipment, it all lined up.
Yeah.
He was performing at the absolute peak of his personal distribution of outcomes.
Okay, so he's an outlier on the high side, fueled by good luck. Now what?
Now, statistics, the cold, hard laws of probability, tell us that extreme events are usually followed by more average events.
Luck doesn't hold.
Luck doesn't hold.
Yeah.
It's random. So on the very next attempt, what's the most likely outcome? The most likely thing is that his luck will be average. Not great, not terrible, just normal.
Which means his performance will be his normal skill level plus average luck.
Which is going to be worse than his performance with exceptional luck.
So he'll deteriorate.
He will deteriorate. He will regress back toward his average, his mean. Not because the instructor praised him, not because he got cocky or complacent, but simply because the statistical lightning in a bottle that was his good luck has vanished.
And now let's flip it. Let's look at the bad maneuver. The cadet comes in for a landing and bounces the plane all over the runway. It's a terrible, sloppy performance.
That's an outlier on the negative side. He's a skilled pilot, so to perform that badly, he likely had a big dose of bad luck. A sudden downdraft, a bird flying past, a momentary distraction.
He performed far below his average skill level.
So on the next attempt,
The bad luck is unlikely to hit again in the exact same way.
exactly, the bad luck is unlikely to repeat. So he will naturally regress toward his mean. He'll fly closer to his actual average ability, which means
He will improve.
he will improve. And he would have improved if the instructor had screamed at him, if the instructor had offered him a cappuccino, or if the instructor had just sat there in total silence and read a newspaper.
That is the mind-bending insight, isn't it? The improvement was already locked in. It was baked into the math of the situation. But because the instructor happened to be screaming while the math was doing its work, he took the credit.
He did. He attached a causal narrative to a random fluctuation. He thought he was the hero of the story when he's just a bystander to a statistical process.
Now, you can see how explaining this abstract concept to a room full of fighter pilots is a tough sell. You can't just write an equation on a whiteboard and expect them to change their entire worldview, a worldview reinforced by daily experience.
No, absolutely not. So the scientist in our source material, he did something brilliant. He set up an experiment right there in the room to demonstrate it.
This is the coin toss experiment. And I love this part of the story because it's so elegant. It just strips away all the confusing variables of skill and flying ability and pressure.
It isolates the randomness.
Yeah.
It's pure luck, visualized.
So describe this setup for us. What did he do?
It's very simple. He just draws a target on the floor with a piece of chalk. Then he asks all the officers to stand up turn their backs to the target.
Okay, so they can't see what they're doing.
Can't see a thing. And then he tells them to throw 2 coins at it over their shoulder, one right after the other.
So you're throwing coins backward. You can't aim. You have no control. This is pure, unadulterated luck.
There is 0 skill involved. It is a random number generator made of people and coins. So they all throw their 2 coins, and then they measure the distance of each coin from the center of the target.
And here is where it gets really clever. They write the results on the blackboard, but they organize them in a very specific way. They rank all the officers based on who did the best on their first throw.
Right. So at the very top of the list, you've got the aces. The guys who, by sheer dumb luck, managed to land their first coin right on the bullseye or very close to it.
These are the pilots who flew the perfect maneuver.
Exactly. They were the extreme positive outliers. Now, looking at the data on the board, what happened to those aces on their second throw?
Well, they still couldn't see the target, so they couldn't try harder or get cocky or feel the pressure. All the psychological explanations are gone.
They're gone.
Yeah.
And yet, almost universally, their second throw was worse than their first. The coin landed further away from the target.
Because their first throw was an incredibly lucky outlier.
And they regressed back to the mean. It was statistically inevitable. Now look at the bottom of the list. The guys whose first coin landed halfway across the room. The total failures.
What happened on their second throw?
They improved dramatically. Their second coin landed much closer to the target than their first one did.
And this is the aha moment for everyone in that room, isn't it? Because nobody screamed at the coins that landed far away.
And nobody praised the coins that landed on the target. The coins didn't have egos. They didn't have feelings.
And yet the pattern on the blackboard was identical to the pattern they saw in the cockpit every single day.
Improvement followed poor performance. Deterioration followed great performance.
It proved right there in front of them that the change in performance required no causal explanation at all. It was just the natural rhythm of statistics, a consequence of luck.
And this brings us to what our source calls the perverse human condition.
I really want to unpack that phrase because perverse is such a strong word. But when you look at the implications of this, it really does feel like the universe is playing a kind of cruel joke on us.
It's a trap. It's a cognitive trap that we are all caught in every single day in all our interactions. Think about that flight instructor's experience from his point of view. He is being conditioned by his environment.
He's a rat in a maze, pressing levers and getting feedback.
He's exactly like a rat in a maze. Every time he punishes someone for doing badly, every time he presses the screen lever, the universe rewards him. He sees immediate improvement.
So his brain forges that connection, it wires it in, punishment works.
It's the only thing that works.
Yeah.
But every time he tries to be nice, every time he presses the praise lever after a great performance, the universe punishes him.
He sees deterioration. So his brain wires that connection. Praise is dangerous. It makes them complacent.
So we are, as a result of pure statistics, punished for being nice and rewarded for being nasty.
And this is the tragedy of it, because we know from decades of actual biological and psychological research that positive reinforcement is actually better for long-term learning and motivation and creativity.
But the statistics of luck completely obscure the biology of learning.
Wow, that's a brilliant way to put it. The statistical illusion hides the biological reality.
And so we're fighting against this illusion that constantly encourages us to be tyrants, to be critics, to be the screaming instructor.
And this applies to so much more than flying jets, doesn't it? I mean, think about parenting. Your kid has a complete meltdown in the grocery store. You're at your wit's end. You finally yell. They stop crying a minute later. And you think,
Yelling worked.
right, that's the solution.
But they were at peak meltdown. They were at an extreme emotional outlier. They likely would have stopped anyway because extreme emotional states naturally regress to the mean. They burn themselves out. But now you've learned that yelling is an effective parenting tool.
Or in the corporate world, it's a classic. A company's at rock bottom, sales are in the toilet, the board panics and hires a new, super expensive CEO or a team of consultants.
6 months later, things are better. Not great, but better.
And the consultant looks like an absolute genius. The new CEO is a savior.
But the company was at rock bottom. The only way to go was up. They were a negative outlier. Regression alone would have made them look better. The consultant might have been totally useless, but regression made him look like a hero, and he gets a huge bonus.
I want to get into the mechanics of this a bit more. We've been talking about luck and skill in a loose way, but the source provides a really specific and useful way to think about this. It's an equation.
Yes, It's what the author calls the equation of success. And it's a super simple mental model that, honestly, it clarifies everything we've been discussing.
Okay, what is it?
The formula is simply this: success, talent plus luck.
Okay, let's hold that in our heads. Success equals your underlying talent plus the luck you had on that particular occasion.
And there's an important corollary to that, which is great success, a little more talent, plus a lot of luck.
Okay, so to get to that truly exceptional outlier level of success, you need a huge dose of good fortune.
You do. Talent alone isn't enough to explain the extreme outliers.
Let's apply this to a specific scenario from the source to see how it plays out mathematically. The golf tournament.
A perfect example. Golf is a game where we are obsessed with narrative, with form, and momentum. We think performance is all about focus and skill and mental strength.
So imagine it's the first day of a major tournament, like the Masters. Let's say par for the course is 72.
Okay, and we have golfer A. Let's call him the star. He goes out and shoots a 66.
That is a phenomenal score. 6 under par. He's leading the tournament.
It is. Now, using our equation, what can we infer about the star? First, his talent variable must be high. You simply cannot shoot a 66 at the Masters if you aren't an elite, world-class player. An amateur with infinite luck still wouldn't shoot a 66.
Okay, so high talent. That's a given.
But to shoot a 66, to beat all the other elite players by such a margin, he also needed the luck variable to be very high and positive.
He needed the lucky bounces, the
Yeah.
50-foot putt that snakes in, the drive that hits a tree and kicks back into the fairway instead of out of bounds.
Exactly. His luck was well above average. Now, let's look at golfer B. We'll call him the straggler. He's also a pro, but on day one, he shoots a 77, 5 over par.
Okay, a pretty bad day for a professional.
It is. So what can we infer?
Hmm.
His talent is probably a little lower than the stars, but he's still a pro. The main reason for his bad score is that his luck variable was likely negative.
He hit a sprinkler head, his ball plugged in the bunker, he had a bad day.
Right. So now comes the hard part. We have to forecast their scores for day two. And this is where our intuition just completely fails us. If you ask the sportscaster or just a fan, what's going to happen on day two, what do they say?
Oh, they look at the momentum. They say, the star is on fire, he's in the zone, he's seeing the lines, he's going to go low again.
And for the other guy?
The straggler's struggling, he's lost his swing, he's in his own head, he's probably going to crash and burn. We extrapolate the trend.
But the statistician sees it completely differently. The statistician makes two simple assumptions.
Okay, what are they?
Assumption 1. Talent is stable. The star is still talented tomorrow. The straggler is still a pro tomorrow. Their underlying skill doesn't change much overnight.
That makes sense.
Assumption 2. Luck is unpredictable and independent. The coin doesn't remember the last flip. So the best, most rational prediction for tomorrow's luck is
That it will be average.
average for everyone, neither good nor bad. So let's do the math for day two. What's our prediction for the star?
Okay, it would be his high talent plus average luck.
And on day one, he had high talent plus great luck.
So his score on day two will be worse. It has to be. If you take away the great luck component and replace it with average luck, his score has to go up. He regresses to the mean.
He might shoot a 70. Still a great score, better than average because he's talented, but it's not going to be another 66.
And what about the straggler? His prediction is his talent plus average luck.
On day one, he had his talent plus bad luck.
So his score is almost guaranteed to improve. The bad luck vanishes, replaced by average luck. He probably shoots around par, maybe a 72 or 73.
So the mathematically sound prediction,
Yeah.
the one that will be right more often than not, is that the best performers from day one will deteriorate and the worst performers will improve.
And the crucial takeaway there for anyone trying to predict anything is what the source says. The predicted performance is always more moderate than the evidence on which it is based.
Exactly. If your evidence is an extreme score, like a 66, your prediction has to be less extreme, closer to the average.
This just breaks my brain a little bit because we are so hardwired to extrapolate trends. If a stock goes up 20% in a week, we think it'll keep going up. If a basketball player scores 50 points, we think he's the new Michael Jordan.
And that is precisely why the Sports Illustrated jinx exists.
Oh, I love this one. The classic urban legend.
It's famous in sports culture.
Oh.
The idea is that if an athlete appears on the cover of Sports Illustrated, they are doomed. They're cursed.
Right. They'll get injured or their team will start losing or they'll just go into a terrible slump.
And people have twisted themselves into knots for decades trying to explain this with causal stories. I've heard them all.
What are the common ones?
You hear theories like, oh, the fame makes them lazy and they stop working hard, or the pressure of being on the cover makes them choke, or my favorite, now the other teams are gunning for them so they play harder against them.
We invent these intricate causal stories because we need a reason for the decline.
But the deep dive explanation, the regression explanation, is that there is no jinx. There is no curse. There is only regression to the mean.
Walk us through that logic. It's so elegant.
Think about what it takes to get on the cover of Sports Illustrated in the first place.
Yeah.
Do they put an athlete on the cover who's having a pretty good average season?
Never. You have to be having a historic season. You have to be breaking records, doing something nobody has ever seen before.
Exactly. You have to be an extreme outlier. You are at the absolute peak of your talent plus luck curve. Your talent is firing on all cylinders, and you get a massive, sustained run of good fortune.
You've had a lot of lucky bounces.
A ton of them. And what happens immediately after you reach the absolute peak? What's the only place to go? You go down. Not all the way down, but back towards your average. It is a statistical inevitability. The incredible luck that helped you get on the cover fades away. You don't become a bad player overnight. You just become a normal, great player again, instead of a supernatural, once-in-a-generation player.
So the performance drop happens after the cover, but the cover didn't cause it.
The fact that they were on the cover is just proof that they were statistically due for a regression.
It's a selection bias.
Yeah.
The cover only selects for people who, by definition, have almost nowhere to go but down, statistically speaking.
Precisely. It's a perfect illusion.
The source material gives another fantastic example of how we torture ourselves with these narratives. This one comes from the Winter Olympics. Ski jumping.
Oh yeah, this is a great one. And it's a sport where luck, in the form of wind and weather conditions, plays a huge, undeniable factor, right?
Huge. So the author describes watching the event and just listening closely to the sportscaster's commentary. Now remember, in ski jumping, you have 2 jumps, and your final score is the sum of the 2.
So we have jumper A. He has a magnificent first jump. Absolutely nails it. He's in the lead by a huge margin.
So what does the commentator say?
The commentator immediately starts building the narrative. He says something like, oh, he's going to be feeling the pressure now. He knows the gold medal is within his reach. He's likely to tense up. He's going to try to protect his lead instead of just going for it.
He's creating a whole psychological profile based on, well, nothing but the score.
Exactly. And then jumper A takes his second jump, and predictably, because his first jump was a lucky outlier, he does worse. It's a good jump, but not as good as the first one.
And the commentator says,
See, just as I said, the pressure got to him. He tensed up. He feels brilliant. His prediction came true.
but then you have jumper B.
Right. Jumper B had a terrible first jump. A real stinker. He's in last place.
So what's the narrative for him?
The commentator says, well, he's completely out of it now. He has absolutely nothing to lose. He can just relax, clear his head, and let it fly. No pressure on him at all.
And then jumper B takes his second jump. And predictably, because his first jump was an unlucky outlier, he does much better.
And the commentator triumphantly says, see, the relaxation helped him. With nothing to lose, he found his form again.
It's a comedy. No matter what happens, they have a story ready to explain it. Tension caused the failure. Relaxation caused the success.
But the reality is, jumper A regressed down from his peak, and jumper B regressed up from his low point. Their psychological states might have been the complete opposite of what the commentator described. It doesn't matter. The math overrides the mood.
And this is what we call the narrative fallacy. We are addicted to stories. We see a change, and our brain demands a why. And regression to the mean is just the very, very unsatisfying why.
It's so boring.
Yeah.
It's not a story. He did worse because variance is a statistical property of the universe. That's not a headline.
But he choked under pressure. That's a headline. That's a story we can understand and repeat.
It is.
I want to zoom out a bit here. We're talking about this now like it's kind of obvious once you see it. But humanity went a very, very long time without understanding this principle.
It's surprisingly recent. And that tells you how difficult it is for our brains to grasp. You have to remember, Isaac Newton figured out the laws of gravity and invented calculus in the 1600s. We could calculate the orbits of Jupiter and predict eclipses with near-perfect accuracy.
We understood the mechanics of the solar system.
But we didn't understand regression to the mean until the late 1800s.
That's just wild to me. We understood the stars before we understood our own statistics.
That's because regression is invisible. Gravity, you can see. You drop an apple. But regression is a statistical pattern that you can only see when you look at data in a specific way. The man who finally cracked it was Sir Francis Galton.
A name that comes up a lot in the history of science and statistics.
Yes, a true Victorian polymath. He was into everything. And incidentally, he was a half-cousin of Charles Darwin, which is an interesting little footnote.
So in 1886, he published a paper that changed everything. And it had the incredibly catchy title,
Regression towards mediocrity and hereditary stature.
Regression towards Mediocrity. I feel like that should be the title of my autobiography.
Mine too.
But mediocrity didn't mean bad or subpar in the 19th century, right? It had a different meaning.
Right. It had a purely statistical meaning. It just meant the medium, the middle, the average.
So what was Galton studying?
He was obsessed with heredity. He was a meticulous measurer. He started with, of all things, sweet peas.
Seeds.
He took thousands of sweet pea seeds. He would carefully weigh and measure the parent seeds, and then plant them, and then weigh and measure their offspring, the daughter seeds.
And what did he find?
Well, he expected that big seeds would produce big seeds, and small seeds would produce small seeds. And they did. Generally there was a relationship. But he noticed something very specific and very strange.
What was that?
The offspring of the very largest seeds were, on average, a little smaller than their parents.
And the offspring of the very smallest seeds
Were, on average, a little larger than their parents.
Nature was pulling them all back toward the center, back toward the average size for a sweet pea.
Exactly. And he had this brilliant insight. He realized that if this didn't happen, if big seeds always had even bigger offspring, and small seeds had even smaller offspring, then over generations, the species would become unstable. Eventually, the world would just be full of giant 100-pound peas and microscopic dust-sized peas. Regression is what stabilizes a population.
And then he found the exact same thing in humans.
Yes, he moved on to measuring the heights of human parents and their adult children. He found that if you have two parents who are exceptionally tall, say a father who is 6'10" and a mother who is 6'2", their children will likely be very tall, but they will almost certainly be, on average, shorter than their parents.
They regress toward the population mean for height.
And short parents tend to have children who are taller than they are. Galton was stunned by this. He wrote that this statistical law was as common as the air we breathe, yet somehow no one had ever noticed it or named it before.
But the real breakthrough wasn't just observing this in biology. It was when he connected it to a purely mathematical concept.
Yes, that was the leap. It took him years to figure this out, but he eventually realized that regression and correlation are not two separate ideas. They are two ways of looking at the same thing.
Okay, this is the technical heart of the deep dive. We need to explain this link between regression and correlation because it is the key to everything.
It is. Galton's rule basically is this. Whenever the correlation between two scores is imperfect, meaning it is less than one score, there will be regression to the mean.
Let's try to visualize correlation for the listener. A correlation of 1.0, a perfect correlation, means perfect predictability.
Right. The best example is converting Celsius to Fahrenheit. If I know the temperature is 100 degrees Celsius, I know with absolute 100% certainty that it's 212 degrees Fahrenheit. There's a perfect formula.
The correlation is 1. There's no variance, no luck, no error in the prediction.
And so there is no regression. An extremely hot day in Celsius is an equally extremely hot day in Fahrenheit. The extremity is perfectly preserved.
But in the real world, in things we actually care about predicting, almost nothing has a perfect correlation of 1.
Almost nothing. Let's take height and weight in adult males. The correlation is positive, but it's only about 0.41.
So taller men are generally heavier, but you can't predict weight perfectly from height.
Not at all. You have skinny 7-foot basketball players. You have stocky 5'6" weightlifters. Because the correlation is loose, because it's not one regression kicks in with a vengeance. Knowing someone is extremely tall only lets you predict they will be heavier than average,
Wow.
not extremely heavy.
So the lower the correlation, the stronger the regression to the mean.
Exactly. And if the correlation is zero, like, say, the correlation between your annual income and the last digit of your phone number, then regression is total. Knowing one tells you absolutely nothing about the other. Your best guess for someone's income is just the average income, regardless of their phone number.
This leads us to one of the most fun and I think most dangerous examples in the source material. The intelligent women marriage puzzle.
Laughs. Yes. This is the ultimate party trick to annoy your friends and start an argument.
So imagine you're at a dinner party. You want to stir things up. You drop this statement into the conversation. Did you know that On average, highly intelligent women tend to marry men who are less intelligent than they are.
And then you just sit back and watch what happens. The table will immediately erupt with explanations. Everyone instantly becomes a sociologist or a psychologist.
What are the usual theories that people come up with?
Oh, you'll hear all sorts of causal stories. Things like, well, of course, smart women don't want to compete with their partners. Or men are intimidated by very smart women, so the dating pool for her is actually smaller. Or she's looking for a project, someone she can guide.
We immediately jump to the fragile male ego theory or some other complex social dynamic.
We have to. We search for a cause. We think there is something about the nature of men and women that causes this observable phenomenon. But the statement, highly intelligent women tend to marry less intelligent men, is mathematically, algebraically, identical to a much, much more boring statement.
And that statement is.
The correlation between the intelligence scores of spouses is less than perfect.
That's it.
That's it. That's the whole explanation. As long as men and women don't marry their exact intellectual clone every single time, as long as the correlation is less than 1.0, which of course it is, regression must happen.
Explain that mechanism for us. Why is it inevitable?
Okay. Take a woman with an IQ of 150. She is brilliant. She is a true outlier, way out on the far right tail of the bell curve, maybe 1 in 1,000. Now she goes out into the world to find a partner. Even if we assume that smart people tend to hang out with and marry other smart people, which they do, the correlation is positive. The odds of her finding someone who is also a 1 in 1,000 outlier are incredibly slim.
Just by pure probability, almost everyone she meets is less intelligent than she is.
Exactly. By simple probability, the person she marries will almost certainly be closer to the average intelligence than she is. Not because she's settled, not because he's intimidated, but because statistically, almost everyone on the planet is closer to the mean than she is. She regresses toward the mean of the population she's drawing her partner from.
And the real kicker, the part that proves it's not a story about gender dynamics,
Is that it works the exact same way for men. Highly intelligent men also tend to marry women who are less intelligent than they are, for the exact same statistical reason. They are outliers, and their partner's scores regress back toward the mean.
but we rarely hear that as a headline, do we? Or if we do, we invent a totally different story to explain it.
It just goes to show how desperate our System 1 brain, our fast, intuitive storytelling brain, is to find a narrative. We look at a simple statistical scatter plot, and we see a complex soap opera unfolding.
We do. And this brings us to a much more serious application of this bias. It's not just about party tricks or sports. This has life and death consequences in medicine and public policy.
It really does.
The source gives a hypothetical headline that really drives this home with chilling clarity. Imagine reading this in the news. Depressed children treated with an energy drink improve significantly over 3 months.
Okay, now imagine you are the parent of a depressed child. You're desperate. You read that headline, what do?
I'm running to the store to buy a case of Red Bull immediately.
Of course you are, because the headline strongly implies causality. The treatment, the energy drink, caused the improvement.
But a savvy listener of this deep dive would now stop and ask a different question.
They would look at the group being studied. The headline says, depressed children. Now, how do you get into a study on depression? What's the entry requirement?
You have to score very high on a depression screening test. Yeah,
You have to be depressed.
you have to be an extreme case. You are, by definition, an outlier group. You were selected for the study because of your extreme score.
And what do we now know about extreme groups over time?
They regress to the mean. They tend to get better, or at least less extreme, even if you do absolutely nothing at all.
So the source jokes that if you treated these same depressed kids by having them hug a cat for 20 minutes a day, they would also show significant improvement.
If you made them stand on their heads for 10 minutes, they would improve. If you give them a useless sugar pill, they would improve. Their extreme condition would naturally moderate over time. It's the natural ebb and flow of things.
So the key thing to understand is that the improvement is real. The kids did get better. The headline isn't lying about that. But the energy drink probably had absolutely nothing to do with it. This is why control groups are arguably the single most important invention in the entire history of science.
Explain that.
You can't just look at the group that got the treatment. You need a second group, a control group of equally depressed kids who get nothing. Or they get a placebo, like an energy drink with no active ingredients.
And that control group shows you the regression line. It tells you how much improvement happens just by the passage of time and the effect of regression.
Exactly. So let's say the control group, the kids who got nothing, Improves by 5 points on the depression scale just due to regression.
Then for your energy drink to be considered effective, your treatment group needs to improve by more than 5 points.
Substantially more. If they also improve by only 5 points, your expensive energy drink is useless. It's just sugar water plus regression.
It makes you realize how many miracle cures and fad diets and wellness trends are just people surfing the wave of regression.
It's the oldest con in the book, and we're the ones conning ourselves. I felt absolutely terrible. My back pain was a 10 out of 10. I went to this new chiropractor. Now I feel better.
You were at your worst, an outlier. You sought treatment. You regressed back to your mean, felt normal again. You credit the treatment.
And it feels so real. The cause and effect seems so obvious. But our brains just they can't intuitively grasp the statistical alternative.
I want to wrap up with one final, very practical application of this. Let's take it to the world of business. We have listeners who are managers, forecasters, investors. The source has a great scenario called the department store challenge.
Yes, I love this one. This is a great test of whether you can actually apply this knowledge in the real world where it's messy, or if you just nod along to the theory.
Okay, set up the scenario for us.
You are a sales forecaster for a big retail chain. The economists at corporate headquarters have done their big picture analysis, and they tell you, our overall forecast is that company sales will increase by 10% next year.
Got it. 10% growth across the board. That's the baseline.
Right. Now, your job is to predict the sales for the individual stores. We got 2 stores you're looking at. Store A last year was a total disaster. They sold $11 million. They were 20% below their target. A real problem store.
Okay, that's our low outlier.
Exactly. Then you have Store B. They were superstars. They sold $29 million. They completely crushed their target. Everyone got huge bonuses.
Our high outlier.
Precisely. So now the boss comes to you and asks for your official forecast for these 2 stores for next year. Your System 1 brain, your intuition, immediately says what?
It says easy. The company's growing by 10%, so just add 10% to everyone. Store A will do $12.1 million. Store B will do $31.9 million.
And that forecast, while it seems logical and fair, is almost certainly wrong. It is mathematically biased.
Right.
Because you were completely ignoring regression to the mean. Store A was a low outlier. Just like the bad pilot landing or the bad golf score. They likely had a run of bad luck last year. Maybe there was major road construction out front, or the store manager had a health crisis.
That bad luck probably won't hold for another full year.
Exactly. So they will regress up toward the company mean. Their performance will likely grow by more than the 10% average. They might jump 15% or 20% as their luck normalizes.
And what about the superstar Store B?
They were a high outlier. They had the perfect year. The weather was great. Their main competitor down the street went out of business. They had a huge run of good luck.
And good luck also doesn't hold.
So they will regress down toward the company mean. Adding 10% to their already inflated lucky number is a huge mistake. Their growth will almost certainly be less than 10%. They might only grow 2%, or they might even shrink a little bit from their peak performance.
So the truly regressive forecast, the smart, mathematically correct forecast, is to predict that your best store from last year will underperform the market average, and your worst store will overperform it.
Yes. Now, here's the fun part. Imagine walking into a board meeting and presenting that forecast.
Oh, no.
You say, okay, boss, my professional forecast is that our star performers, the heroes from last year, are going to slack off, and our losers from last year are going to suddenly become heroes.
You'd get fired. Or at least you'd look completely crazy.
The source calls this intuitive suicide. Because if you present the mathematically correct forecast, people will think you are being perverse. They'll accuse you of punishing success and rewarding failure.
It's the flight instructor all over again. Why are you projecting low growth for Store B? They have momentum. They have a winning team.
And momentum is so often just a fancy word for a run of good luck that hasn't run out yet.
It takes a very brave, or maybe a very secure analyst to bet on regression. But if you actually want to be right more often than you're wrong, you bet on regression every time.
You do.
We have covered a massive amount of ground here today, from the heat of the Israeli desert to the Victorian gardens of Sir Francis Galton. If there's one single thing the listeners should take away from this entire deep dive, what do you think it should be?
I think it's this. Be skeptical of the cause, especially when you're looking at change following an extreme event.
Explain what you mean.
When you see an extreme performance A record-breaking heat wave, a massive stock market crash, a child acting out terribly, or a brilliant, flawless presentation. And then in the subsequent period, you see it return to normal. Just stop. Pause for a second.
Don't jump to a conclusion.
Don't immediately invent a story about why it changed. Don't ask what went wrong after the success or what did we fix after the failure. The very first question you should ask yourself is, was that first event just a lucky or unlucky outlier?
Ask if it was just the coin toss landing on the bullseye by chance.
Precisely. Sometimes there is no hero in the story of the turnaround, and there is no villain in the story of the slump. Sometimes the tide just goes out, and then it comes back in.
I want to leave all of you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over this week based on everything we've talked about. We've talked about sports and business and heredity, but I want you to apply this to your own life story. Think about the narrative you tell yourself about who you are. The times you were on fire at work and felt like an absolute genius. The times you were in a rut and felt like a complete failure. And think about the reasons you gave yourself for why those phases began and ended. I worked harder. I lost focus. I finally got my act together.
That's a powerful question. How much of your own autobiography is actually just you looking at a series of random fluctuations in a vast statistical universe and seeing a face in the clouds, inventing a story where there isn't one?
Maybe we aren't the captains of the ship quite as much as we think we are. Maybe, more often than not, we're just riding the waves of variance and taking credit for the crests and blaming ourselves for the troughs.
A little humility in the face of statistics goes a very long way.
It certainly does. So this week, watch for the regression. It's absolutely everywhere. Thanks for diving in with us.
Until next time.